Welcome to the Chiropractic and Legal Injury Podcast, recorded live at our events. We're here bringing you the expertise, insights, and tools you need to navigate the world of personal injury care and to uncover what you didn't know about car accidents. It's no accident you're listening today, so let's get started.
All right. Well, good morning. We're here with Dr. Scott Tauber with AIPIP. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. So tell us a little bit about you and what it is that you do.
Sure. Yeah. I'm the COO and Director of Education at the American Institute of Personal Injury Physicians, AIPIP. And what we do is we help providers of all specialties improve the personal injury aspect of their practice and help them become more marketable, help them with their documentation, with their case management, and basically understand this very broad and ever-changing field that so many providers really never learned in their professional training. So we help them from start to finish throughout the entire process.
That's wonderful. How long have you been doing that?
Been doing that for coming up on about 20 years.
Wow.
At this point.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a long time.
So what got you into that?
Well, that's a good question. So what got me into this whole consulting and working with providers is I got a call one day from a PI attorney. And at the time, I was still in practice. I don't practice anymore. I do 100% consulting and coaching. But at the time, this attorney called me up and said, Scott, I'm having difficulty settling this case with this chiropractor. And we had done business together, so they knew my records, they knew my notes, they knew my management, and said, can you go over there and just, on a day off and just help them out? Well, that was kind of like the aha moment. When I got there, I realized just how poor their notes were, just how poor their overall understanding of personal injury was. And it led me to start to develop forms and documents and training to help providers, because I knew that wasn't the only one. And so it all originated from an attorney who kind of got me and got the impetus to get this whole thing going.
That's wonderful. Well, so you said you drafted forms and try to improve the documentation from the chiropractic offices. Can you tell us some of the most common mistakes that you still see today that are being made at the chiropractic offices?
There's a lot, but if I had to pick a few, is some of the mistakes are not documenting all of the patient's symptoms. That's really a biggie. If you want to start at the beginning with just some of the history mistakes, patients come in, they fill out forms, they give the doctor an idea of what their symptoms, injuries, and conditions are, but sometimes the doctors don't do the best job in taking that and putting it into a formal history. They skip symptoms, they only choose the ones that they like and work on those. Maybe they don't do the greatest examination, so they cut corners. And then, of course, we get into just daily notes and some of the med-legal issues that certainly as a practicing physician you wouldn't know about. But if you don't know them or you're not aware of them, you can leave them in the records, and then the representing attorney has to kind of go in and do cleanup.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, tell me, I'm curious. Give me your biggest horror story of a case that you've reviewed over the years, and what tips you would provide somebody to not make those mistakes.
Well, there's a lot. So this one's pretty big, where this has to do under the umbrella of case management. The chiropractor had a patient come in. They literally hit their head. It was a rollover accident. They hit their head, and they were treating this patient, and the patient was passing out. They were literally blacking out in their home, and the doctor was actually documenting it, and yet they didn't do anything about it. They didn't refer the patient out. They didn't do any diagnostic imaging. They continued to manipulate the patient, even documenting 2 times where the patient literally passed out, once in their kitchen, once in their bathtub, and again re-hitting their head. Turned out that the patient had a subdural hematoma. The patient actually self-released because the doctor wasn't addressing their issue. Self-released, went to a medical provider, got the CT, had a subdural hematoma. That didn't turn out well for the chiro. So,
for the people watching this that aren't in the medical field, what is a subdural hematoma?
That's a bleed inside your brain from trauma, and it's a life or death issue. And this chiropractor kept manipulating the spine, not addressing the actual injury of the head, and that, like I said, didn't turn out well for the chiro. And so it's a dramatic case. but I'm sure it's not the only one. There's certainly other ones, not quite as dramatic, where chiros in their documentation and case management have issues.
So that's terrifying. So how long did they treat this patient while they had this brain bleed essentially going on?
Yeah, they treated for at least, my recollection was about 4 weeks before they did, before the patient actually self-released. And in that time, like I said, they have the original injury of hitting their head in the shower, shampooing their hair, falling back, hitting their head, trying to open up the fridge, falling back, hitting their head in the kitchen. All of that was documented and pretty dramatic. And my view, as I mentioned, didn't turn out well for the chiro. In my experience, I've also been involved in cases where some of these turn into malpractice situations.
Sure.
And many of them originate as personal injury cases because they're underlying trauma cases. And chiros don't take it seriously.
Well, there's 3 elements that I've always adhered to when observing the behavior of a physician on a case, and that is diagnose, treat, and refer out. So can you tell us a little bit about those in your experience and what tips you would provide to chiropractors when discussing those 3 elements?
Well, diagnosis is extremely important. Obviously, that comes partially from the history, from your physical examination, from your experience, from imaging that you might provide in your office. But really, if you want to raise your diagnosis and get to many commonly missed issues, you're going to need advanced imaging, which is typically outside. Treatment, very, very conservative treatment. And in fact, I would counsel patients that, there's no rush to treat until you get all the information. Again, the underlying cause of this patient coming to you is trauma. Trauma to the spine, trauma to the head. There's no rush to start getting in there and manipulating until you have all the information. And of course, co-management is significant and plays an important role in personal injury. Having another set of eyes, diffusing the liability, and just, you can't treat everything. You can't be everything to the patient. And I think, and I believe also, that patients understand that when they go to one doctor, that they literally cannot treat every single symptom.
So, and for 20 years, you've been teaching this on a postdoctorate level.
Correct.
What impact have you seen that your courses have had on the chiropractic profession?
Well, I've seen that, and I do this for providers all over the United States. I've seen that they improve their practice, number one. So the providers are more, the number one that providers tell me all the time is they feel more confident in treating personal injury patients. And then the patients get better care, and then they get better outcomes because the provider is able to give the representing attorney a better case at the end, their documentation and their management. And so the client gets compensated. That makes the doctor more marketable, so attorneys are going to be more apt to refer to people that truly understand what attorneys need and want and are helpful as opposed to hurtful in cases. So if you think about it, the reach has been pretty significant throughout the United States because patients are actually getting better care and treatment and management for their cases over the years.
Oh, that's wonderful. As an attorney in the medical legal field, I've always seen that the best outcomes are when the providers, chiropractors especially, take a multidisciplinary approach to treatment, to collaboration, and that's improved patient outcomes. Now, we're doing a seminar coming up in January where we're putting on a historical, first time ever done, multidisciplinary panel. We're bringing in a neurosurgeon, neurologist, trauma psychologist, neuroradiologist, so a lot of specialists, and you're on that panel. So tell me what you're looking forward to the most and what you hope the chiropractors will get out of it.
Well, the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is to see how, in real time, how other providers start to evaluate cases and what they look for. When you make a referral, you kind of lose track and you get a paper report of, what the doctor believes and thinks and sees, and that's one thing. But to actually kind of hear them and hear their thought process as they evaluate a patient or review records in real time is really interesting to me, especially neurologists and, like you said, the other panel, the medical providers. And what I hope that providers get out of it is that they see that there's more to personal injury than just the treatment, that
Sure.
their treatment, and that they're part of a team. And being part of a team is really important in personal injury. It builds stronger cases, it gets better outcomes, it helps their patients and the clients, and it really makes them more marketable as well when they're able to work with others.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you've worked with a lot of attorneys over the years.
Yes, I have.
Now, if you were to recommend what to look for in a good personal injury attorney, what would you recommend to the general public about, what to look for, what questions to ask?
Sure. Well, to find a good attorney, I would start with, do they communicate? One of the biggest issues that I see is that attorney firms don't communicate with providers, and they don't communicate with their clients. So if you can find a firm that communicates, a firm that's reaching out to their patients on a regular basis, how are you doing, how are you progressing, firms that really are proactive and have an understanding that every case is important. And when you sometimes go to certain firms, that gets lost, in the volume, and I'm sure it's not intentional, but sometimes it does get lost. But if you could find an attorney that's really going to look after you, communicate with you, find doctors for you if necessary, and really just walk you through, because it's, no pun intended, it's a traumatic event.
Sure.
And patients, clients, they don't know what to do. And not only are they hurt, and now they have all these other things to deal with. Find an attorney like yourself and your firm that will do all of those things to help the client get the best results.
That's right. And I'm sure you've testified in court. Have you done a lot of litigation work over the years?
I have. I've testified several times in court in multiple scenarios. Yes.
Okay. So let's say a chiropractor gets his subpoena to testify for the first time ever, and he calls you for advice. What tips would you give him?
The first tip is take a nice deep breath. The second tip is start to go through your records with kind of a bird's eye view, not like a doctor's view, but just look at your records and start to think, okay, could I have done something a little bit better here? And could I have done this? Or where are the holes? And once you identify those, then start formulating, because that's going to be where they're going to, obviously, if you see it, other people see it. So start to formulate your answers on why you did or didn't do things and what's important. But what I would suggest to doctors, if your documentation is really good, in my experience, when you get in a deposition or you get on the stand, if the questions they start to ask you are just off the wall or have nothing to do with the case, and you're kind of wondering why are they going down this path, your documentation has been good, because there's nothing to ask you because you've already explained it in your records. But when you don't, that's when the fun begins.
Well, give us an example of a case that you were either a part of or reviewed where it was something that the chiropractor did wrong that caused the case to fall apart, resulting in a loss.
Yeah, well, there's several, but in a PI case, the chiropractor actually injured the patient because they didn't do imaging and they didn't do a good workup, and there was actually a good case, but it turned totally sideways into a malpractice situation, and that was obviously not a good outcome for that chiropractor.
Sure.
On that case. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for the client as well, the patient, that they're not able to get what they should be getting because of poor documentation or failure to refer out. And
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, that is a reality, and that's why we do the seminars that we do. And again, you've been doing it a very long time, and you've made incredible contributions to the chiropractic and legal profession. So I have to sincerely thank you for that and everything that you do.
Thanks.
I want to talk to you about MRIs real quick. So
Sure.
You mentioned earlier failing to order imaging. So imaging is obviously one of the types of imaging studies that are out there. So can you tell us what you've seen the impact of an MRI can have on a case?
Yeah, well, MRIs obviously give us a great look at the disc and some of the spinal structures, and they give us a more advanced look. So if you're treating somebody that is not responding, or even if they are responding, or they have radicular symptoms, or they have motor weakness based on your examination, MRIs are invaluable. My view is more information is better than less.
Sure.
A better diagnosis is better than a poor diagnosis. And as a provider, I can share with you, when I'm crystal clear on what the diagnosis is, and I'm not what I like to call swagging it, which is scientific wild ass guess. It's an acronym for is what swag is. When I can deliver a much better outcome for the patient, clinically and throughout the entire process. So having and using technology is extremely important, and MRIs being a crucial piece, and providers should not be afraid to use technology. And when they don't, it's considered a negative test anyway.
Sure.
So you might as well. That's one of the biggest fears, by the way, is what if the test comes back negative?
Right.
And you should not be afraid of that situation at all.
That's great advice. And so I hope a lot more physicians become aware of the conferences that you put together and see the value in the information that you're putting out there. So Dr. Tauber, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for everything you do.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thank you for everything you do for the clients and for the profession as well.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
You too.
From all of us at the Lazzara Law Firm and the Chiropractic and Legal Injury Conference, thank you for listening. We hope you never need us, but if you or someone you love does, know they'll have a team dedicated to helping them rebuild, recover, and reconnect with what matters most, their loved ones and the life they deserve. This is the Chiropractic and Legal Injury Podcast, where knowledge is power and collaboration transforms care. If today's episode opened your eyes, share this podcast with your network and help spread the word about the realities of personal injury care. Follow us on social media to keep learning and connecting with this incredible community.